In this demo, we will show you how the Setup Wizard will remotely detect your IBM Smart Cube on the network. This Setup Wizard provides smart defaults for most settings. Needing only limited information, the Setup Wizard makes it simple for you to configure your Smart Cube.
Once the IBM Smart Desk is installed, you can launch the Setup Wizard either by selecting Launch the IBM Smart Business Setup Wizard at the end of the Smart Desk install, or from the Windows Start menu. The Setup Wizard welcome page is displayed. It reminds you to verify that you have followed the instructions in the Start Here poster or the IBM Smart Business User's Guide for IBM I before you continue. The welcome page recommends collecting some network information about your environment. The Setup Wizard will attempt to discover all of the required information on the current network. However, in the event that some of this information cannot be discovered, you should have it available to enter it manually. When the network information is discovered, it will be displayed to you as Smart Defaults. You should confirm that the defaulted information is acceptable to you or override it with different values. The description on each panel and the online help include very useful information. IBM recommends that you read the panels and use the online help as much as possible. Specify your IBM ID and password to authenticate to IBM Smart Market. At this point, the setup program needs access to the Internet to authenticate to the Smart Market and retrieve the list of Smart Cube profiles for which the IBM ID is Administrator or Backup Administrator. The authentication will allow the systems you're authorized to configure to be discovered. The setup program starts browsing the network for non-configured Smart Cubes. As mentioned before, the administrator's PC must be on the same LAN segment as the Smart Cube. DNS service discovery and multicast DNS protocols are used to discover the network and the non-configured Smart Cubes. Your IBM ID and password will be saved and secured on this system for future communications with the Smart Market. The IBM ID can be the value-added reseller's IBM ID if it has been authorized to the customer's site number. The list of Smart Cube profiles is displayed. The profiles in the list are associated with your IBM ID. At the end of successful configuration, the available entitlements will be decremented by 1. The profile should have descriptive names that identify the system with which they are associated. Non-configured Smart Cubes found on the network are listed in this panel. Select the system that matches the serial number of the Smart Cube you want to configure. Only Smart Cubes with an operating system that matches the IBM Smart Business Software Stack entitlement in the Smart Cube profile are shown. In other words, if the profile selected has an x86 Linux entitlement, only non-configured x86 Smart Cubes in the network are shown. If it were an IBM I, the partition ID is appended as a suffix for the serial number because the serial number is not unique, since all the partitions have the same serial number. The help on this panel will tell you what to do if the serial number of your Smart Cube is not shown here. The Setup Wizard shows you the picture of the discovered network. In this example, the Smart Cube is connected to the private or internal network shown as a green line. It is also connected to the public network or Internet shown as a red line. If there was only one private network, the graphic wouldn't show the red line to the public network. This graphic provides an introduction to the network configuration that follows. For IBM I, discovery is based on the private network being the one network through which the administrator's workstation is connected, and the public network is indicated if more than one line description is found on the system. Several network components have been discovered, and they'll be displayed in the following pages. Although the network components have been discovered, you need to verify the settings are correct and provide some values if required. In this example, the IBM Smart Cube will be configured in the private and public networks. The Setup Wizard shows you the defaults that were generated for the private network. A host name is always generated. The domain name is discovered. The idea is to provide smart defaults. If the administrator accepts all the defaults by just clicking Next on each panel, the Smart Cube configuration will work. The Wizard generates a smart default domain name if discovered from the DHCP server. If there was no DHCP server, an attempt is made to get it from the workstation running the Setup Wizard. In most environments, the Setup Wizard is able to provide defaults for most, if not all, values. In some situations, the administrator may want to take some action, such as changing the IP address that was selected, because they know they already have a device with that address that isn't powered up at this point. You're encouraged to change the smart defaults as you deem appropriate. The online help on this panel tells you how to select a static IP address. In this example, since a public network was discovered, you're asked if you're planning on deploying public services on the public network. If you are, a static IP address on the public interface will be required. Because we answered yes to running public services, a public static IP address in the public network is required. Finally, you're presented with the gateway and DNS information that was discovered. Verify the gateway and DNS addresses. At least one DNS entry must be provided, and the DNS should be able to resolve IBM.com because the Smart Cube needs access to the Smart Market to complete the configuration. Now the network configuration is deployed. The private and public interfaces are created. The DNS is configured to provide, at a minimum, resolution of the Smart Cube's fully qualified host name. The firewall configuration is also updated. Next, internet connectivity is tested. And finally, on x86 Linux, the system checks for any critical setup and configuration fixes. This completes the network configuration phase of the setup wizard. Now we enter the system configuration phase of the setup wizard. You are going to configure the first Smart Cube administrator. The password rules are very strict, so read the online help to find out the password rules. In addition to configuring the Smart Cube administrator specified before, a special user ID, admin_sys, is created and the root password is changed. Initially, the admin_sys user ID and root in Linux will have the same password you specified in the previous panel for the first Smart Cube administrator. All three users will initially have the same password. The passwords can later be updated using the People Management interface in the Administrator panel. In this panel, you enter contact information primarily for service use. This information is not associated with the Smart Cube administrator, even when the contact could be the same person as the administrator configured earlier. The purpose of this panel is to provide information about the person who should be called by IBM services, both phone number and email. This email will receive alerts when problems occur in the Smart Cube, with a link to access the problem description in the Administrator panel. Next, you specify the desired language settings for the Smart Cube. Next, specify the organization name. This is used for LDAP and Domino server domain. This is an informational panel describing the creation of the intranet website in the Smart Cube. It is provided in IP address form since this is the URL users will initially need to connect to the Smart Cube and get the IBM Smart Business Quick Start client and other clients. Once the IBM Smart Quick Start is installed, users will be able to use host name and the links provided in the launch folder. This is an informational panel showing the default backup settings. It shows when the backups will be run. In this example, the backup drive was not installed on the system, so the panel shows a warning message reminding you to install the backup drive after completing the setup wizard and before backing up the system. The Smart Cubes are shipped with the backup drive already installed, so you should not see this error message. In this panel, you specify if your Internet Service Provider, or ISP, provides an SMTP relay through which mail can be routed externally outside the Smart Cube's domain. In this panel, you specify the SMTP relay server host name, port number, 25 is the default port, and the user ID and password if the SMTP relay server requires authentication. Finally, the summary page is displayed. After you click Finish, the system is configured with all the information entered in the previous panels and much more.
That concludes the demo. Now you can use the Setup Wizard to quickly configure and set up your own Smart Cube. Watch our application installer video on installing applications on your Smart Cube.